Let's bring in our guest, Miranda Devine, ace columnist for the New York Post and a Fox News contributor and host of Pod Force One. And Charlie Hurt, who's going to get up real early tomorrow morning and do Fox and Friends weekends, both Saturdays and Sundays, starting at, wait for it, 6 a.m. Eastern on Fox News. Charlie, in your honor, I don't want you to snore off here.
Right, exactly.
I mean, this was quite surprising, I think. I'm not sure people understand all about it. I know John very well. We worked together. We're actually going back to Reagan years. That's how long I've known him. He is a hardliner. He didn't get along with President so well. Not always, but sometimes they work together. I'm not sure what the classified information is. You know, John's a lawyer, a good lawyer. He wouldn't be as sloppy, but what do you think's going on here? Well,
you know, there was, of course, as you remember, because you were in the administration at the time, there was a period where President Trump actually liked having him as a hardliner because for the first time in Trump's lifetime of negotiating, there was somebody who was more of a hardliner, crazier than him. And so he could play good cop.
You know the story.
Yeah.
I got to tell the actor. So I don't know, it started a few months after John came in. If you're meeting in the Oval, not the situation, if you're meeting in the Oval, policy meeting, okay, you know, we'd sit around the desk, resolute, in chairs. John tended to sit toward the back of the room near the fireplace. But he was seen, and the president would look down there and go, "Hey, John, how many wars did you start?" It was a joke. I mean, it was a joke, I think. And so that became gossip around the West Wing. But I think people took it rather well. And the president's quote, it was cut off, unfortunately. He liked to put John in with foreign leaders, you know, these bilats, and scare the you-know-what out of them. I mean, so you're right. John served. I'm sorry that he broke up with Trump. I really am, because Bolton's a very smart chap.
Although I think that he certainly would be even more in the hardliner camp now if he were still in the Trump administration. But, you know, and of course, Swecker is exactly right. Turnabout is not fair play. We don't want this to be weaponized in the other direction. But I have to say a couple of things. One is that, you know, it's not like the system. I think that John Bolton can expect the system to treat him fairly. They did get a search warrant. I don't think that they paid, you know, I think that the judge that gave the search warrant was probably believing real information. I don't think the prosecutors are necessarily, the line prosecutors are after him. And so I think he will be afforded a whole lot more protection than the President of the United States was. And so all day long, we have been listening to all of these people wrenching their pearls about this invasion. And of course, none of them were talking about the invasion of Mar-a-Lago.
The opposite.
Right.
They were saying
they were
applauding it.
Right. They were cheering
no one is above the law.
Which, by the way, I talked about at some length with Kash Patel 2 nights ago. And last evening with Tulsi Gabbard about that invasion. So, I mean, how do you read this?
And Kash Patel told you that there was absolutely no predicate to raid Mar-a-Lago. So you would assume that there is more predicate here. I just, you know, I think that I'm ambivalent about this. I'm still to see what they have. But I think, you know, if it's just the classified information, I think it's a strange hill to die on. Why this would be, you know, you only have so much political capital to blow on going after Donald Trump's enemies, even though Trump doesn't have anything to do with it, even though you might have a decent predicate. And I do think in this case, Bolton was stupid and rash because he was told by the NSA there was classified information in that book. He took some of it out, but not all of it, and he rushed headlong into publishing it. And the judge, Royce Lamberth, at the time, ironically a Reagan appointee, he actually said he denied the government's motion, the Trump administration's motion to block publication because he said it was too late. There were advance copies already out there. But he did rule that, that this was rash to publish it, that Bolton should have known better, that the book did contain classified information, and he had opened himself up to legal jeopardy.
So
that's what he's finding.
There may be some cleanup here. There may be
I think so.
Just in a second, we're always out of time. Charlie, unfortunately, my friend John Bolton, I still regard him as a friend, but he kind of came down with Trump derangement syndrome, particularly in the last year. I mean, he's saying things on a constant, no matter what the president says or does, John would come after him. hammer and tongs with various columns and TV appearances. I find that very unfortunate.
And he's also wound up in league with a lot of other former intelligence officers who are also being questioned right now about their handling of classified material.
Like Andy McCabe.
Yeah, all of whom are I think, driven by the same sort of Trump derangement.
We got to leave it there. I'm sorry. I'm just sorry. The whole thing.
I know.
It's a weird story. Anyway, thank you very much, Miranda, Devine, Charlie Hurd.